So thank you for taking the time to do this interview today. We're really excited to have you here, and your research looks really interesting.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, so could you maybe start off this episode with introducing yourself and your lab?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Chen. I'm right now the seventh year in Santa Clara University, and right now associate professor in the Department of Psychology. I also affiliated with the neuroscience program and Santa Clara. So my lab focuses on using a combination of different approaches, including neuroimaging, behavioral, and computational methods to study learning and memory functions in both typical and neuro diverse populations.
Yeah, that was a really great introduction to your lab. So could you tell us what inspired you to focus on like neurodivergence, memory, and learning?
Yeah, my career actually is a very winding road. I started as a psych major at the beginning and actually wanted to be a clinical psychologist. But during my college training, I found that doing clinical work is actually pretty challenging, very emotionally draining, and I don't feel like that's something good for me. It's just not a good fit. So I decided to explore other possibilities, and then I started to do engage in research, and it's super fascinating. And I was in a lab, doing some research about reading development in children, and that was super fascinating to me. And I started to explore a little more and learn about memory, about learning. And so originally I was from China, and so we studied like second language learning in back in China and how people learn English. And so learning memory is a key part of this process. So I started to dive deeper in learning and memory. And once I did my PhD in Wisconsin medicine in the United States, I started a position in Stanford School of Medicine. And in that lab, we focus more on the neuro diverse population, like people on the spectrum, or people with ADHD, or with different kinds of learning disabilities. So that's where I start to combine my research interest in learning and memory and brain functions in the neurodiverse population.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so could you maybe explain like what methods like your lab uses, like maybe functional neuroimaging, meta-analysis, and computational models, and how they contribute to your understanding of these like cognitive processes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can get started with meta-analytical approach. So right now there's a lot of studies on specific topics, right? Different studies may review different brain regions for different functions. So we really like to do this kind of like not primary source research, but like sitting on top of those primary source research to look at what are the consistent findings are in the literature using quantitative method. So that's in generally the meta-analysis we have done. So for example, we could look at over, for example, thousands of papers on a specific topic. What are the papers have examined the brain connections related to ASD or related to ADHD? And then we can kind of filter all the papers according to some criteria. And then we can maybe come down to like a few handful of research articles, and then we're going to extract data from those papers, and we can compare what are the consistent convergent evidence about, for example, neural connections or brain connections underlying the differences between the typical group with ASD and the typical group with ADHD. So the meta-analytic approach is mostly a way to kind of synthesize the current research all together to provide like an overview of the current status of the research in on a specific topic.
Oh, wait, just a quick question. Is it
Yeah,
similar to like a literature review or like what is different about it?
yeah. So that's a good question. So literature review, I think is very relevant to this meta-analytical approach, but literature review is very broad, so it can be very qualitative in the sense that you can just synthesize the conclusions, findings, and organize them into specific topics to show your own theory and claims. But this meta-analytical approach mostly involves the quantitative method. So you actually have to extract data like the mean value, standard deviation, or the coordinates of brain regions. So then you can do statistical analysis on top of those data generated by other research. And then you can draw some conclusions based on the statistical findings coming from the meta-analysis. So I will say literature review is just more general. You can do both qualitative and quantitative approaches, but a meta-analytical approach is mostly quantitative so far and based on statistical methods.
Yeah, that's definitely really cool. So could you maybe explain how you use like computational modeling in your lab and also like fMRIs?
Yes. So let's start with computational models. So with all the new technologies from recent years, for like AI models, neural network models, computational models actually has a long tradition being used in cognitive science or cognitive psychology research to test some theories about how our mind works, right? The challenge is just that a human in this way is, even with a neuroimaging approach, fMRI, it's very hard to get the causal inference because we cannot manipulate people's brain directly. We cannot open people's head. We cannot, inject virus to people. It's just not ethical. So it's very hard to control many potential confounding factors using human subjects, human participants. So this is where the competition models can be super useful. For example, if you can design a model that can do some specific cognitive task, for example, image recognition. That's something very common we use in the lab. So, for example, you can train a model to recognize different kinds of objects like animals, tools, fruits, vegetables, or human faces, right? So the model, a computational model, can behave on the specific task like a human would do. And since there are some neurobiological similarities between the models and our human brain, so we can actually selectively change some parameters which could bear the neurobiological meaning or implications to the human brain system. And then if we change the parameters, and then we can see how the manipulation could work or could change the behavior outcomes or even internal representations in the neural network models, and then we can compare the outcomes behaviorally or internal representations to data we have collected on the humans. So the idea is that if some theory about how our brain works is actually can be tested, or it can be true, then we could replicate this using the competition models. And the competition model, under certain treatment, according to the theory, could behave like someone had those conditions. So, for example, we are super interested in people on the autism spectrum, and there is a theory about people with autism could potentially have a lot of excitatory signals in the brain related to atypical functions of glutamatergic synaptic activities, for example. So in the model, we can actually change competition models. We can actually change some parameters in the activation functions to create this kind of overall over excitations in the model. So then we can see, okay, when the model is trained to do some tasks like face recognition, will the model have some impaired patterns in face recognition, and how does model represent faces of different people or faces of the same people in the model, and then we can extract the data from the model and compare what we um, collected from the human subjects. So the idea is that, okay, if this overexcitation theory is actually potentially correct to the human brain function, or could be a reason to explain the face recognition issues in people with autism, then we would observe very similar behavior outcomes or reputational outcomes in the model, like we observed in humans. So that's the computational part we use.
That's
And for
very
the
interesting.
yeah, and for the neuroimaging part, we basically use open access data set to look at brain connections, brain structures, may underline the or may show differences between typical control groups, healthy control groups, compared to people on the spectrum or with different neurodivergent conditions.
hmm Oh, just like a quick question. I was wondering when
Mhm.
you're making like these computational models, which programming language do you have to use or like skills do you have to like kind of like learn?
Yeah, so that's another good question. I know right now a lot of high school students are super interested in this kind of AI approach or the competition models. Um, I would say actually any language could be super useful. Um, the current most popular one is definitely Python, and there are a lot of existing packages you could use like PyTorch. TensorFlow is also supported by Google, for example, can be used for those model simulations. But of course, if you are interested in other programming languages like R, you can also use R to do all those simulations. So I think it's more important about the underlying logic. What do you want to do, and understand the algorithm of all the different models. So the actual software or package is actually less important to some degree.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
So we were just like wondering if there were any like challenges that your lab faced when conducting these like research, and how did you address them?
Yeah, so at Santa Clara University, we primarily work with undergraduate students. So definitely undergraduate students have a lot of already on their plates, right? So they need
Mhm.
to do time management, they need to take classes, some of them have to work. So for us, the most important thing is to help our students balancing the time and guide them through, the path to do research while they're already dealing with a lot with like coursework, extracurricular activities, or even they have to take care of their family. So there's a lot of duties our students facing. So for us, our goal is trying to help them to see the capacity they could have if they want to work in research. So I think that's a challenging challenge we always face. But of course, we have so many students to serve, and psychology right now is a big major in the college.
Mhm.
So how can we serve the large major with the limited number of faculties? It's a constant challenge for us. Like in my lab, on average, I have somewhere between like 8 to 12, 15 students in the lab. It's only one, PI in the lab. It's just
Mhm.
me. So how can I divide my attention, divide my time and effort to all the research groups? That's definitely something, we are all working together with all the students to find a good balance.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So I was kind of like wondering with these computational models, are there like any gaps or like issues that arise from it?
Could you clarify what kind of gaps you mean? Like,
Like,
um,
is there anything that like might be like inaccurate or like researchers are like working on to improve?
Got it. Yeah, that's a really good question. So, there has been actually a long-term debate about whether can we use this model to simulate human brain activity or human functions. I think it's going to be an ongoing question. The big issue is, our brain is actually incredibly complex is there's millions of neurons, right? So we even though now we have a very large computational capacity with supercomputers can handle a lot of computations, but actually the speed and the complexity, I think, is still falling behind our biological organ, our brain, and also the structure architecture of those models still do not kind of reflect the brain structure in a more plausible way. So I think a lot of scientists, researchers are working on how can we build more neurobiologically plausible models, computational models, so we can again understand the brain work, how the brain works in a
Mhm.
better way. So I think that's the gap in general we see in the literature. But again, there are so many different types of computation models, and they work at different levels of the neuronal activity. So it really depends on the specific types and the type of tasks focused on. So I think there's a variety of differences, but the largest gap I think is how can we make those competition models more neurobiologically plausible.
Yeah, okay, that makes like a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned like how you use neuroimaging to like conduct research into autism, and like
Mm-hmm,
last year, I think in 2024, you also published a paper on hippocampal and ventral temporal lobe connectivity
mm-hmm,
in ASD. I was just
mm-hmm.
like wondering what were like your most surprising findings like in your lab.
Yeah, so this is a continuing line of research I have started back when I was a postdoc at Stanford. So, when we talk about autism or ASD in general, we mostly think about their, social challenges, their language difficulties, and their restricted, repeated behaviors and interests. But my research focused on how they actually also have, potential challenges in memory and learning. I think first, this is something people normally overlook. So I will say this is probably the biggest surprise to me and maybe some of the people in the field to see, how hippocampus and even another center for memory, the anterior temporal lobe, may be related to the underlying neurobiological dysfunctions in people on the spectrum. But specifically, we focus on something called the pattern separation memory. Basically, is how our brain can keep um, seemingly similar stuff, but treat them separately. So, give you a concrete example. Everyone had probably a few birthdays or handful of birthdays already, right? But every birthday event have similar um, objects or themes or people participant in your birthday party. But every year is going to be something different. So
Hmm.
how can you keep your memory from your 15th birthday different from your 16th birthday and don't get them confused is actually a very important skill and memory function. So, and this is something very interesting and actually challenging considering face recognition. So our human faces look very similar overall, right? Everyone has eyebrows, two eyes, and a nose, mouth, and they also roughly in a very similar, spatial configuration. So how can I tell, oh, this is actually someone I know, this is actually someone I don't know, but looks similar to the one I know, those
Hmm.
people are familiar, is actually a very important skill. And this involves a normal function in the hippocampus, involves a normal function in learning and memory. So we are interested in how this um, um, function, the pattern separation memory, is impaired in ASD, and how that is related to their social and language functions, and even potentially their core, symptoms like insist on the sameness, or their symptoms like fixations on nitty gritty details. So that's everything we're trying to put together a theory about learning and memory in his Cape campus specifically, and in autism, and how that is related to their core, symptoms like social language dysfunctions and other core symptoms.
Okay.
I think you like mentioned like there's like differences in like memory. So like I was just like wondering how like those differences like present in maybe like a neural image, like the hippocampus or like the ventral lobe.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So behaviorally, we actually anecdotally we have observed that people, for example, on the spectrum, they have kind of better rote memory, in the sense that they are very specific about um, individual items in their memory. So they seem to lack of this ability to generalize over similar experiences. In my 2004, the 2024 paper, I think we actually found something interesting. Is there's also you know heterogeneity, meaning that distinct subtypes, subgroups in the people on the spectrum. So actually, there are some people who had challenges uh, generalizing over the experiences, but there's other subgroup actually had the opposite pattern, meaning that they are going to over generalize their experiences. So they are going to treat everything in a very similar way. So in the hippocampus, based on the existing research, we could see, for example, if you show people images of different people, of different person identity, right? The activation patterns in the hippocampus should look very differently. So, for example, if you have a set of neurons firing. So for the faces, for example, Taylor Swift will be activating one subset of the neurons, but the face for Sabrina Carpenter may activate another set of neurons, right? So this is how in the brain we can keep the representations of the human faces separate.
Yeah, so we
How? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh wait, sorry, you can continue to finish.
Oh, yeah. So I'm just trying to say, so this is about the pattern separation memory, and the neural way. So in the neuroimaging, even though we cannot look at the activity at the neuronal level of each individual neuron, we could still look at of sub regions within the hippocampus. There are different patterns of activations, different sub groups of activity for certain phases, and other types, other groups of activity for different phases. So if the function is disrupted, our prediction, we actually haven't done research yet, but our
Mhm.
prediction will be for people who have trouble doing the generalization, they would show very distinct patterns activation. So their brain subregions involved in activating for Taylor Swift and Sabrina Carpenter will look very, very different. Like there's literally no overlap at all, right? But in typical people, they should have some overlap because they are both like female artists, for example. But if people who have this trouble with overgeneralization, then the activation patterns of those two female artists should look very, very similar to each other. So more similar than the typical group. So that's our prediction about, for example, hippocampal or medial temporal lobe structure could relate to this pattern separation ability in people with, autism, for example.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard of like this pattern separation and activation before.
Mhm.
So, how do you think that your findings from your research will inform personalized inventions for neurodivergent people?
Yeah, that's another very, very important question. So, for example, we just talk about the subgroups in the autistic individuals. So, currently, for example, if you only consider them all have very similar pattern separation ability, you are going to give the same type of training. It's not going to be very beneficial to everyone, right? So, our research actually point out you have to understand what kind of inclination, what tendency they have in terms of their learning and memory functions, and then you could have very different strategies to help with them their memory and learning. So, for example, for people with this under generalization, they don't generalize their experiences. We should actually point out the similarities across different objects, different faces, different experiences to show, well, even though they are different, but they're actually something they all share, and they can potentially become, you can realize they are related to the same group of people, or they share some features of same type of objects. So that's something very important for people who don't do the generalization very well. But for people who have this tendency to overgeneralize, you actually have to do something different. You have to point to the distinctive features of the different objects and say, actually, even there are some overlapping features or some similarities between some objects. You actually have to see what is most important to kind of distinguish from one object from another object. So I think this will be the starting point for us to have individualized intervention programs to help people on the spectrum for a better learning and memory function.
Mhm.
Yeah. So are there any like emerging technologies like maybe AI modeling that like maybe can help improve like our understanding of like research or like interventions in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, but I think we're still behind with what we want to achieve. First of all, combining the neuroimaging technique and computational models has been a very fast-growing, field in the research right now. But I think there's still a lot more can be done in this field, especially working with neurodiverse population. Um, Another part of this is a lot of people are trying to use neuroimaging data to help or to improve the accuracy of diagnosis. I think that's another direction people are pushing the boundary. In terms of intervention, if, for example, if we can do the diagnosis more specifically, more accurately, right? So with AI, with the help of the AI, then we could help the individual in to kind of place him into a more suitable intervention program. I think that's also something the AI could definitely help quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, are there any like future directions or unanswered questions that you're currently hoping to figure out or trying to figure out in your lab right now?
Yeah, so I'm very interested in this pattern separation ability, memory functions in ASD. So uh, I'm trying to just see first at which cognitive level this happens, right? So when we look at the memory or memory repetition, it's actually the output of the learning whole process. But learning is a very complex, cognitive activity. It involves
Mhm.
perception, it involves attention, it involves a lot of metacognitive skills as well. So when we say, oh, they have atypical memory representations, they cannot do this pattern separation ability very well. So basically, at what stage, or maybe multiple stages, there are challenges or dysfunctions in people on the spectrum actually happened or occurred, right? So this is something is still largely unanswered. And also, if since we know that they have this pattern separation memory dysfunctions or challenges, what are the actually tangible outcomes in their social behaviors, in their language functions, and how are they related to each other? I think this is also something we haven't explored yet. And also, there is a tendency people always treat people with clinical diagnosis versus healthy controls as dichotomized groups. But actually, autism symptoms is a spectrum. Everyone has some kind of levels of autistic traits. So in my lab, we are also interested in looking at this at a more a spectrum or a continuum approach. We're trying to see whether this kind of autistic traits, even in healthy controls, may relate to their pattern separation memory functions.
That's really neat.
Yeah, so I was like wondering if you have like any advice for, any like students looking to enter the field of like neuroscience or psychology or maybe even research.
Mhm. You mean or you mean like high school students or students going into like college?
Well,
Yeah, both maybe.
Yeah, I think for high school students, it can be tough because right now, you know, of course, Stanford, UCSF, they may have a larger capacity, but like in Santa Clara, um, it's very challenging to mentor the existing college students already. So it's very hard to provide additional opportunities for high school students. We tried our best to accommodate, but it's always hard. So that's for one thing. So for high school students, I think, if you're interested in this field, read books, read about the current theories from the books, and also if you're interested in some data analysis skills, learn about stats, learn about programming language. I think will definitely help. Um, and if you can get into any research opportunity, even just shadowing, I think that'll be totally fine. And also don't feel um, you know, too concerned if you cannot get any research opportunity in your high school because when you get into college, if you are really motivated, you will have a lot of chance to get involved in research. So I know there's a lot of pressure for people in high school right now, especially in the Bay Area. People are super, curious, very motivated, so they always want to get more involved. I think it's okay to kind of take a step back, really trying to focus on like what you can learn, what you can grasp right now, and when time comes, the opportunity will reveal themselves to everyone. So I think that's really important. And for
Mm,
college students, I would say just trying to get involved in research as much as possible, and really, putting your time and efforts. Really try to cultivate this kind of research mind, not just about like reading ability, but also trying to have this analytical logic, trying to understand the gaps in the literature, for example, and how the data, like graphs, figures, how do the data shown in those graphs or tables support the claims um, the authors make, right? So I think that's really important because um, this is really about critical thinking skill. You want to um, be able to evaluate the claims of the other people, but you want to do this at the evidence based approach. So you need to make claims backed by data. With the social media right now, a lot of stuff are kind of inflated by false data, false
mhm.
claims, a lot of stuff without any actual data or misrepresented data, which is even worse, right? So I think for college students, getting involved research is not just about, oh, can I have a career in academia or in research? It's more about cultivate this scientific inquiry mind. So we can all become better information consumers in the future. So when you see something in the news or in the social media, you can like be a little bit more skeptical, like, hold on, I don't think the data I see or presented by the author or by the blogger is actually supporting the claim. So it's really about this kind of independent thinking and critical thinking ability, skepticism, right? So it's really important for us to guide our life in general to make wiser choices in a lot of situations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
definitely
definitely,
agree. Yeah.
yeah, misinformation is definitely really rampant on social
Yeah.
media. Um,
Yeah.
just like as a last question, I was wondering that if you're interested in like, I know like you said you did psychology at first in your
Mm-hmm.
undergrad, but
Mm-hmm.
for anyone who might be like interested in going into computational like neuroscience, kind of like what you do in the lab,
Mm-hmm.
what are like potential career or like pathways?
I think there's a lot of stuff because if you consider computational skills um, as just a way to interact with data, a way to extract information, right? You can literally do that in any potential fields. For example, you can definitely use the computational skills in research in academia. You can also use your computational approach in industry, biotech companies. You can also use computational approach to guide the policy making process in our government as well. Because, for example, our CDC, our local government, health department, they are sitting on large data sets of a lot of healthcare related data. So computational approach can be really, really helpful to extract useful information, find important patterns from this kind of large chaos of ordered data.
Yeah.
So if you can have some really useful computational skills, literally you can apply it to any potential field. I think people are very interested in like healthcare, really into interested in policy making, people really interested in just research, creating new drugs, or even people who are interested in finance, right? The computational
Mhm.
approach can be very useful for make predictions as well.
Yeah. Okay. That
Yeah.
sounds, yeah. Computer science skills are definitely really useful.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say, even you don't have to be a computer science major. You can pick up some kind of computational skills
Mhm.
as you,
Definitely.
you know, do your study, do your training. Like as I said, I was a pure psych major. I've never taken any computer science classes. I just need to gather skills from the internet, books to learn a little bit about the computational approach. By no means am I a very good programmer. I'm actually suck at all the programs I use.
Mhm.
But you just need to be good enough to achieve the goals you want. I think that's really important. You don't have to be a, super efficient, super clean, super organized programmer to do all those work. You just need to, as I said, it's not actually about the programs or the language you are using, the program language you are using. It's more about the underlying thinking ability, thinking process you can generate. Once you have the right thinking process, right mindset, learning about those programming skills and how to write the programs actually becomes secondary.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. I definitely agree with everything you said. So I
Yeah.
think that was like our last question, and we definitely like learned a lot from what you said today.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation that we had.
Thank you.
Mhm.
It's very nice talking to all of you.